my Kenvians, PapaKen here, and welcome to episode 3 of Discovering Torchwood. Today, the episode I'm going to be talking about is Ghost Machine, which, I don't know. One thing I do want to say about this episode, and it's not an annoyance or anything like that really, but the name, like how they kept referring to the, what they saw as ghosts and all that. I don't know, it felt like a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's understandable that you would need to put it into terms that, you know, are somewhat easily understandable, but at the same time, it just, I don't know, something about that just felt weird to me. But, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Before I get into this, as for how I feel about this episode, it was definitely a step up from the previous one. Actually, I think of the three, it may be the best one overall, for some reasons that I will actually mention now, starting with my first favorite part of this episode, which is just the opening chase sequence. It was really enjoyable to see that, I don't know, just the way it felt choreographed, the way everything happened, it just felt, honestly, fairly authentic. I thought that basically the entire time everything felt really well executed. So yeah, just the entire opening chase sequence, the music with that, the acting overall, I just thought it was pretty well done. The one small gripe I might have with that is that they kind of overdid it with the running by people and bumping into them, and just like, you know, it seems like kind of a trope when it comes to that, you know, you have to run into people. When it seemed like there wasn't always kind of a crowd that they couldn't have just gone around. I don't know, that's just something that kind of irks me, but it's not a major annoyance with this episode. But yeah, the opening chase sequence overall, I really enjoyed. My second favorite part of this episode was the little creepy kid, like especially that first little scene. Now admittedly, the kid's acting was not so good, but just the sequence itself was really interesting, especially the way that Gwen was, you know, seemingly paralyzed in that entire sequence. Like, you know, she could only look and she could feel what was going on. And the actress Eve Miles, she did a wonderful job of portraying the emotion that was being, I guess, telepathically sent to her. Both her and Owen, I mean, they were just phenomenal, but I'll be getting to him soon. But, yeah, just that entire sequence with the little creepy kid, I found really interesting overall. And that brings us to my third favorite part of this episode. It was almost a quote of the episode, but didn't quite make it because of the actual quote, which I felt like just kind of trumped everything else. And it's a line that is kind of repeated throughout, at least a couple of times, but when they're trying to look up who the guy, or, you know, who the person is, Owen says, he's in the phone book. So yeah, just the fact that they found him through the phone book is like, when they have all this technology, it's like, oh, that could, you know, it's easy, somewhat easy, we have a very unique name, and oh, he's in the phone book. I found that kind of funny, even though I guess these days phone books are mostly kind of, forgotten. Of course, this was back in 2006, so I guess I can't, you know, complain too much about that. But anyway, moving on. That brings me to my fourth favorite part of this episode, and it's more of, Actually, I'm going to, on my notes here, live, while I'm recording this, put a little asterisk there, because I think my favorite part is actually more of a theory/question. So we will return to that soon. But anyway, if I can keep the numbering correct in my head, my fourth favorite part of this episode, this is sort of a common theme, I guess, in the reviews so far, but Gwen and Reese, despite the fact that we got to see some clear, you know, problems that they were having to deal with in their relationship, I just love the way it was portrayed. Of anything in this show, honestly, the relationship between Gwen and Reese feels the most real. It's the part of the show that feels really the most adult about it. It's like, you know, they're dealing with, you know, some adult issues, some adult relationship issues, in what I would consider a rather adult way. And yeah, obviously the circumstances are a little bit out there, but again, in my opinion, I just feel like their relationship, like the way Gwen uses the device to think back to not think back, but go back to their previous memories, and it just, again, it reflects a very adult, real relationship, and that's one of the reasons why they keep popping up in my reviews here. It's one of my favorite parts. That's just a big part of it. So, I mean, again, I know that they're probably going to portray more and more problems in the relationship. Hopefully they won't break up, but, you know, that's just my personal selfish feelings there. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of the two in the episodes to come. But moving on, my fifth favorite, well, okay, I'm actually going to put this a different way. So I'm going to sort of bundle up the creepy kid with what happened next, because I don't feel right in saying what I wrote down is actually a favorite part. So the flashbacks, or what the device shows them in general, is definitely a favorite aspect of this episode. It is very powerful, and especially when we see what Owen sees, and just that scene with, and this is what I wrote down verbatim, the manipulative, raping bastard. I mean, watching that scene alone, I mean, you could argue whether or not the acting was good. That's beside the point. Just the idea of someone you care about, or even not even someone you know, but seeing someone in a situation like that, it just fills you with rage. Like, honestly, I wish I had been recording when I was watching that episode, because I actually had to pause for a minute because I was actually getting angry watching that scene. But yeah, just so, you know, everything that comes from those, but especially that intense look back that Owen got, which brings us to my sixth favorite part of this episode, which was Owen's just shock and obsession with everything that happened and what he saw. And, I mean, again, I know that Owen, probably throughout the course of the show, he will be portrayed as a dick. He's going to be portrayed as a douchebag to some degree. But, like, this episode really humanized him. And I think not only to us as the viewer, but also for Gwen, the character. Just seeing what he went through, seeing how much that just tore him apart inside. Especially from where he felt the girl's emotions. That really humanized him and really brought him up a lot of levels, in my opinion. Now, I found him really funny and enjoyable at first, and that hasn't changed at all, but this just brought a whole new level of his character to life for me. And I just absolutely love that. Absolutely. And that brings us to a little bit more of a lighthearted note, my seventh favorite part of this episode, which was Gwen on the gun range, or I guess more Gwen and Jack on the gun range. And that scene was a lot of fun. It was silly, well, very silly at times, but it was a lot of fun. I do have a question. Actually, I don't think I wrote a theory down on that. So, yeah, hopefully I'll remember something that came from that a little bit later. I feel like this is sort of evolving as it goes along. And I've watched the episode twice, so you'd think I would be more prepared at this point. But anyway, moving on from there, my eighth favorite part of this episode was finding out that Jack doesn't sleep. Now, obviously, we know that he can't die. And again, you know, from where I've watched all the new Doctor Who episodes, you know, I knew that already, but I don't believe it was ever touched upon that he doesn't sleep. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be remembering incorrectly. That may have been something that came up when Jack met Dr. Tennant, or Dr. Tennant, the 10th Doctor. But I don't remember that really being something that was brought up, other than just the fact that he can't die. So yeah, just that idea, that was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that might play into some of the future stories. The fact that he doesn't sleep, just something else that the other Torchwood recruits, or the other Torchwoodians, whatever you want to call them, what happens if they find that out, that he doesn't sleep. You know, just something interesting. But moving on from there, my 9th favorite part of this episode, and this actually goes back to Gwen and Reese, but it's when Gwen took the device, which I thought was kind of funny, because I kind of assumed Jack would have a little bit more going as far as security goes, since the others took some of the artifacts home and they weren't supposed to. And then Gwen just kind of walks out with a device, which that seemed like a little bit of a plot hole, because I thought it was actually on the scanner or whatever that was initially, but I don't know, something could have happened and I overlooked it, or it could just be a little plot hole, whatever. But the fact that she took it and she used it, I thought, I just enjoyed that scene. And again, it played into Gwen and Reese's relationship, which I really do enjoy. Probably one of my favorite parts about this show, beyond just Jack Harkness and Gwen herself. But moving on from there, my 10th favorite part of this episode, when Owen confronted Ed Morgan. Oh my god, that scene. I had no idea what Owen was going to do. I honestly completely expected him, especially with how just torn apart he was, how obsessed he was with finding this man. I honestly thought that he was going to go in there and murder him, especially since he kept checking to see if anyone was around. But even though he didn't, and he confronted him in the house, just that scene was, it was so well done. It was just phenomenal. But moving on from there, going on to my 11th favorite part of this episode, is the other half of the device, or as I wrote down, just the other half, and what that brings along. You know, since the one half shows us what happened in the past, the other one shows you the future, or rather, as we find out, a potential future. Although one thing did seem a little bit strange, in that Gwen didn't see the potential future until she put them together. Although, since what she saw when she put them together actually happened, maybe that's the deal, is that the other half shows you a potential future, but when you put them together, it shows you the actual future. Maybe I'm off on that, but that sounds like a pretty good estimate as to how this actually works. So yeah, let me know if you think I'm missing something there, but I really like that, and the fact that the other half happened, and then, well, actually, the funny part of when what's his name, Bernie, when Bernie says, so you don't want to see the other half, and everyone just kind of like, one of those moments of, what'd you say? It's like, I know they're silly and they're kind of a tropey little moment that a lot of shows do, but I like it when they pull those off well, and it did make me laugh, so I thought it was pulled off well. And that brings us to my final favorite part of this episode, and honestly, I just have to say it was the final segment. The final segment when all the pieces came together. Just dawned on me that that's kind of a pun based on what happens in this episode, but just all the pieces come together. We find out just everything that had been going on, and just all the pieces of the puzzle fit together to bring on this future that, Gwen was trying to hope to avoid, but ended up just, not being able to. That what happened, what she saw, was the actual future, or was, I guess in this case, the most likely future. So yeah, those are all my favorite parts. Let's move into my annoyances, which, as always, I do have a few. Some people get annoyed by that, but in my opinion, it's just the nature of the beast. I'm reviewing it, and I gotta be critical of things. So my first annoyance with this episode is it's right at the end of the opening chase sequence when Gwen pulls out the device and she's just staring at it and she presses the button. It's like she's just looking at it, it's blinking, and presses the button. Now, Jack actually made a comment about this, is like, why would you do that? And I was wondering the exact same thing while watching. It's like, why would you just... unless it's some sort of deal where the person holding it is compelled to push the button, which if that's the case, it's never actually explained that that's part of it. Unless there's some force compelling the person to touch the button, it just didn't make sense to me that she would do that. Had she, when she pulled it out of the code, had she accidentally pressed it, that would have been one thing, and that would have made more sense to me. But the fact that she pulls it out, looks at it, sees that it's blinking, and then presses it, again, I don't know. It's like you're holding an alien device, and this isn't her first day anymore. I mean, for all she knows, it could have been a gun, and she could have, just blown away everything in front of her. And that just, again, that's just a part that really annoys me about the plot of this particular episode. So yeah, there you go. My second and final annoyance with this episode, and maybe this is just me being a American/gun owner, but when Jack is teaching Gwen how to shoot a gun, and he tells her to shoot with one hand, shoot with one hand, not two, from the side like that. That's not proper gun technique. That's, especially for someone that has never shot a gun before, that's a good way to make them hurt themselves the first time they shoot a gun. That's why you use the second hand to brace, so you don't hurt yourself. Well, I guess that'll kind of lead into one of my potential theories or questions having to do with this episode, but yeah, just the way that was handled just really annoyed me. Again, as someone who has handled guns, I know how you handle them, and that's not the right way. Of course, then later they showed her holding, it the correct way, so I don't know, I don't get why they did that. Unless, and I'll just go ahead and roll this into my questions. Although before I do that, any of your own favorite parts or annoyances, please be sure to leave them in the comments down below. But my first question regarding this episode: does Jack have some sort of crush on Gwen? Or is there something happening there? Because the only reason, the only assumption I can make for why he had her do that was so he could get right behind her, very, very intimately close, and show her how to shoot the gun one-handed. And I don't know, I mean, that's the deal, is Jack kind of... I can't remember the correct term that the doctor used, multi-sexual or whatever. It's kind of beyond bisexual. But is Jack kind of falling for her and is going to cause issues with the relationship with her and Reese, or what? And that's not the only moment that makes me ask that. It's not only was the closeness there, which was very clearly sexual, or at least that's the way I perceived it. But also at the end, when after she's gone through this shock of accidentally killing someone, and they're standing alone, and he holds her close, and she leans her head over on him. It's is something going to happen there? Because again, it's I really enjoy Gwen and Reese's relationship, and I love Jack, don't get me wrong, but it seems strange that they would go in that kind of direction. Or maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just a matter of, you know, they work close and he was being comforting, and that could be it. But again, had that been the only time where it's like they were really close there at the end of the episode, that would have been one thing. But again, just when they were on the gun range, he was making some rather clear motions, and again, in my opinion, or that's just the way it seemed to me. If I'm a little bit off base there, please do let me know, but again, that's just my perception of this. And that does bring me to my second question of this episode, and this is a rather simple one. That, I mean, it may happen, it may not, but, I mean, the shock that Gwen is going through at the end of the episode, will that affect her going forward? Will that affect her in future episodes? Now, I know that in Doctor Who, there's a lot of times where, you know, like some pretty dramatic and traumatizing things happen that are basically kind of brushed over in the next episode. So if they don't carry it over, I won't be surprised. But again, just given sort of the more adult audience leaning, or well, it's for an adult audience anyway, the way that the show leans, I kind of expect them to have that affect her in some way, or at least have it be brought up in the future. So yeah, that's my question. Will Gwen's shock affect her in the future? So there you go. Now moving on from there, I guess those were just more questions than theories, but I guess you could work them into theories if you wish. But I'm not going to right now. Moving on to my tracks of the episode. Ow, I hurt my fingers. I wrote down two. I guess you could say like an honorable mention would be the track that was playing during the opening chase sequence, because again, that was just really enjoyable and fun and, you know, fairly intense. But the two that I wrote down as the tracks of this episode, definitely the biggest one being the music playing when Owen is in Ed's house. That's just the intensity of that music. It felt perfect for what was going on. And then, and this one may be a little bit more silly to some of you all, but then when Owen is chasing Bernie, there was just something about that music that, while it was kind of a bit more lighthearted and silly in a way, it felt appropriate. It felt really good. Maybe it's its stark contrast to the music that had been playing when Owen was in Ed's house, but just something about that track really worked for me. So yeah, when Owen was chasing Bernie would also be like the secondary track of the episode for this one. So yes. Now, as for my quote of the episode, now considering some of the things I've talked about, I'd say that this should come as no surprise, but, and I'm not going to read it out here, but Owen's monologue when he confronts Ed. When Ed is sitting down on his chair, when Owen is sitting down in the chair across from him, and he confronts him and tells him what he knows, and just that entire scene sent chills up my spine. It was just perfectly executed. Like had they not even kept doing like the little flashes over to Ed and Ed's hands, showing his discomfort and showing like how just uncomfortable and scared he was feeling, had they just focused on Owen that entire time, which I honestly wish they did, it was just such an intense scene, and I loved it. And that his monologue during that portion was just so amazingly done. I loved it. That definitely has to be, other than I would say Gwen and Reese are probably one of my favorite aspects of the show so far. But as far as the episode goes, that confrontation, that monologue are the best best part of this entire episode by far. I just absolutely loved it. So yes, there we go. So those are all my thoughts really on the episode. In case you weren't clear already, I really did like this episode. Definitely a huge step up from the previous one. And overall, I think also better than the first episode. It just felt a lot more impactful. It felt a lot more powerful. Definitely had some annoyances, obviously, but it really, really worked. And it has me ready for the next episode, which is going to be Cyberwoman. And I can't help but wonder if this is going to be like the same kind of Cyberman slash Cyberwoman, even though I guess in Doctor Who they were pretty much just all Cybermen, I suppose. But I'm curious whether it will be of the same sort of species as the Cybermen that appear in Doctor Who, or if this could be something different. Because again, even when the women would get converted on Doctor Who, they became Cybermen. So I'm very intrigued to find out what happens next, and if it's anything like some of the other Cybermen episodes, this should be a really intense one, and I'm really looking forward to it. Please don't let me down. But all right, everyone. As always, if you have any thoughts you want to share, please do leave them in the comments down below. Just any thoughts in general about the show so far. If you are new to the show and you're sort of following along with me, welcome, and I hope you're enjoying so far. But until next time for Cyberwoman, everyone, I'm Papa Ken, and I will see you for the next episode. Later days.